I love how Zoom tells us that you've promoted us.
Telling you have a lot of control when you're the host. Let's see, we're just waiting for Gus.
Hi, Mike.
Pete, how are you?
I am fine. How's your air conditioner working?
It's hanging in there. It's hanging in there. How about yours?
Ours is okay. We just have one zone for the whole house, but it works.
We had the whole, mass save upgrade and update and everything a couple years ago. So it's a pretty new system.
Oh, good. Did you have to run a lot of ducting on the old house?
Not really. No, they had existing central air. Because it's so
good.
old, we have two separate units for different parts of the house. Well, you couldn't just get one, but
Waiting for Gus. So. Okay. While we're waiting for Gus, I'll just let you know Nick is at the Water and Sewer Board meeting. They're having their rate hearing this evening, so he'll join us later.
I see part of Gus.
Now you know how my father Zooms.
Hi, Gus.
How's that?
Gus, you all set? Okay. I can't hear you, so I'll wait to start until I can hear you. Things worked better when you were in Chicago. Can you go back?
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hey,
Excellent.
there we
So
go.
I'm coming in on the phone for. Don't ask me why. Suddenly, my laptop wasn't recognizing my microphone, and then there was a meeting ID, a participant ID, and a password, and I wasn't listening closely enough to what it was telling me to do. So I got it wrong like 3 times before I finally did it in the correct sequence. So sorry about that.
Well, glad you got it right. Thanks for coming. Chris, you all set to have me start?
We're all set.
Okay. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Medfield Board of Selectmen is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen or view this meeting while in progress may do so by following the instructions on the agenda and meeting notice. All votes subject to remote participation and therefore will be roll call votes. And this is the Select Board meeting for August 11, 2020. And let's see. We remind everybody that the meeting is being recorded. And we do want to take a moment of appreciation for our troops serving around the globe in defense of our country. Thank you. And we'll also mention this evening about the town's loss of Elizabeth Mann this past week, a 51-year service to the police department as a crossing guard, a police matron, I guess was the official title. But I think Mrs. Mann was especially known for her friendly smile and on all the encouraging words that she gave to the kids that came by. She always seemed to have something to say to the kids as they came by. And of course, she and Bill seemed to attend all the basketball and baseball games in the town too. When she retired, July 21, 2015, after 51 years of service, it was declared to be Elizabeth T. Mann Day in Medfield by the Select Board. Our first appointment tonight is with Chief Garrett. Request the appointment of Mark Sterling to the position of Special Police Officer and fill-in dispatcher. Chris?
Yep, let me promote the chief right now. There we go.
Good evening, Chief.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Chief.
Hey, Chief.
I hope everyone is doing well. We are having quite the hot streak right now. And unlike all of you, I'm apparently the only one without air conditioning. So
Oh, no.
suffering through it.
Stay at work late then.
I'm trying to enjoy some of the summer with my family if I can. Thank you for having me tonight. We wanted to take this opportunity again to express our condolences on the loss of Mrs. Mann. I had the opportunity to meet her when I first started in Medfield, and she was incredibly warm and gracious with me. So it was a pleasure to get to know her briefly before she passed away. That being said, tonight I'm here to request the appointment of Mark Sterling. Mr. Sterling is currently a dispatcher for the Natick Police Department. He's been a dispatcher there for coming up on 19 years. He is a Millis resident. He is also, I graduated the Reserve Intermittent Academy in 1993, where he has worked as a special for various communities. Bellingham initially supported his position with the Reserve Intermittent Academy. And I think he would be a welcome addition to us, particularly because of his dispatch experience. As we forecast out the future personnel changes we may or may not have. As you know, Mr. Shabertes is still on our list for a position of police officer if one should open up. He is a dispatcher of ours now, so it would be nice to have somebody to backfill that position if needed, without having to pull from our on-duty uniformed personnel in order to do that. So I think Mr. Sterling brings an opportunity for us to kind of get a 1-2 punch with his appointment.
Any questions, Gus?
No questions. Nope.
Mike?
Questions?
Do we have then a motion?
So then I would move that we approve appoint Mr. Mark Sterling to the position of Special Police Officer and fill-in dispatcher.
Second.
Mr. Peterson.
Yep.
Mr. Murby.
Yes.
And Mr. Marcucci, yes.
The other thing I'd like to just bring up, just to keep you updated on some of the changes. As you are aware, Governor Baker has changed some of his orders, executive orders. In one of those orders, he made a comment about law enforcement beginning to enforce orders on social gatherings. The Massachusetts Chiefs of Police Association is working with the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security to determine the best course of action for that. We certainly, as a collective group, have some concerns or questions about what that enforcement would look like in terms of whether we actually have personnel to support enforcing this, or whether some of these enforcement opportunities are consistent with the Constitution and a person's civil liberties. So that being said, we have received direction from the Massachusetts Chiefs of Police Association to take an educating only role right now and refrain from ticket enforcement until they can have further talks with the governor and his staff to best roll out this program. I know they have a couple of suggestions in terms of maybe a COVID task force that's designated to go into those areas that are seeing higher than usual test positive cases. So those are all conversations they're having, but we've been asked to kind of hit the pause button until we get some clarification from the governor's office.
Is Sorrell on? Is that
Yeah.
Mark?
That's Mark.
Yes, I am.
So Mark, I think on this, I read this as well, and I think it would be helpful to understand, and to the extent the chief or Christine can shed some light on this, to kind of understand the level of discretion that we have locally with respect to the request from the governor that police departments do this. I mean, I don't recall an issue coming up when we had, where this was a question, but I think it would be helpful, Mark, for us to understand what discretion, if any, we have on how this ultimately is implemented locally, and what authority the Commonwealth has to essentially direct the conduct of our police department.
So are you framing that as a question for an answer?
Well, if you have an answer that you'd like to give us, or if you or the chief would like to give an answer, that would be helpful. If this is something where you want to go back and look at something and return and advise, I'd be happy to have you do that as well. But I'd always prefer an answer right away, like any annoying client, Mark.
Well, so it comes back to, it starts with whatever authority the governor had to begin with, because going back to the original emergency declaration, that had general language in it about enforcement. So the question always was, well, what is the extent of that enforcement? And frankly, I'm just what I've seen and heard through the media in the last few days. I don't know specifically what's in place that would authorize the imposition of fines, for instance, right now, where that's coming from. You don't any more than the town needs a bylaw or some legal authority to do it. So does anybody else, the state. You can't just, we have a government of laws, at least at the moment. So there needs to be some specific authority for that, and I'm not sure what it is, and I'm sure that's what the Police Chiefs Association is looking at as well. Now, local boards of health have authority as well, and what we didn't want to see from myself and my colleagues at Municipal Lawyers Association was this put on the shoulders of the local boards, commissions, police, what have you, who have the hands full already without getting into this stuff. So I would agree, I would concur with the chief. We're somewhat in limbo at the moment, and I'd certainly welcome any information she can provide, or if I'm certainly willing to reach out to my colleagues for further input.
That's one kind of question, Mark. The other question is, there's obviously a discretionary element to law enforcement, just like there is for prosecutors, or,
Absolutely.
the speed limit is a certain amount, a certain rate.
Right.
And, this police officer are not required to issue a ticket every single time they observe someone exceeding the speed limit. And so I think I'd also like to understand, because I think this is something of a policy decision for the towns, to the extent that we have some discretion to decide how we're going to do this, because it's sort of, again, ironic. We've been having a lot of productive discussions about policing and police reform and all of these other questions that are going on. And here's another instance where we're trying to increase the number of circumstances under which we're going to have police officers going into people's homes and having to interact with the public and crowds and in situations where certainly you may or may not have to. And so I'm sure that's a concern that the police chiefs have as well, that we're now going to say, all right. And we saw this in New York City. In New York City, when the police were enforcing and breaking up parties and running through parks and things like that to break things up in April and May, there was a lot of serious serious questions about how that was done at the direction of the mayor of New York. So I think we should understand locally what our options are, depending on how the legality of what this order sorts out and how we're going to do it. Because I think we should try to have something of a consensus from the board, and so that our officers know that what the direction is going to be, and that they're supported by us and aren't going to be in a situation where they're being asked to do something that that none of us has had to deal with in this situation at the behest of the governor and the behest of an order that it may not be the clearest thing. So
I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, I can conceive of some municipalities taking the position that we're just not going to get involved in enforcing this, period. But if you're assuming that you are willing to participate, then I think ultimately you always have the discretion, and it comes down to how you want to exercise it locally. The alternative from the governor's standpoint is to involve some state personnel, whether it's the state police or a special force or what have you.
And I do think that that's a direction that they are exploring right now. I can speak to my own personal concerns, and I won't speak for the entire Massachusetts Chiefs of Police Association, but my personal concerns are this, that we are in very unique times, but we still have the Constitution that we have to follow. And some decisions now that are being made, in my estimation, conflict with some language that we've already received either through the Constitution or through the Supreme Court. So for example, in the state of Massachusetts, if I stop a motor vehicle for a traffic offense, I am not permitted, absent reasonable suspicion or probable cause, to identify any of the passengers in the vehicle. And that's a vehicle that's being operated on our public roadways. So to ask us to check gatherings at homes where we enter into somebody's homes and try and establish whether the people there are related, if they're not related, what their identities are, I think is a very invasive action for us to take. I can see it becoming problematic for the police. I can see it being problematic in litigation down the road where somebody feels as though their civil rights have been violated by an over-intrusive law enforcement action. And it's an area that I think is very gray for us. As you know, a person's home is, it's considered the sanctity of your home, where we have to have extreme cause to enter into somebody's house. And I just don't know that this meets that threshold for a public gathering, which is a civil violation. It's not even a criminal violation at this point. So I'm reluctant in that regard. I think that we are very comfortable continuing our education role, which is to advise people if we go to their homes what the governor's order is and maybe ask for voluntary compliance. But beyond that, I would say we would need some assurances and protections from those legal minds at the State House that are going to, protect us against future litigation for violating somebody's civil rights.
Yeah, I mean, at a very practical level, as far as Medfield's concerned, I see this of the ilk where you have the classic where the parents are away and kids organize a party that gets out of hand. I think it's much more likely that if you get involved, it's because it's something like that or something that is outside and got way out of hand and neighbors call complaining about noise and whatever. And just in terms of the numbers of people there, if they exceed the number that's been set by the governor, then that's a pretty simple. You don't have to get into intrusive stuff. And then if they refuse to disperse, then that's an independent situation.
So I have a couple of, maybe these are dumb questions, I don't know, but the first one, I'm assuming that, ask it as a question. Chief, is there anything that you have heard that would suggest there will be any burden of enforcement on our local police department outside the boundaries of Medfield?
You mean for us to go outside of Medfield to assist in enforcing? I think
If the state is going to start telling us things we need to do, first question I have is, are there things we're doing only inside our town that we're discussing here, or are there things we're talking about that have the state co-opting any of our resources to enforce the law outside of our town boundaries?
so. Right now, everything is pertinent to our town only. Obviously, we have some mutual aid agreements. So if we were called to another town to assist in mutual aid, we would be covered under that. There is some conversation taking place now about developing some type of a task force. I can tell you from a practical standpoint, I don't have the personnel support right now to contribute to any type of statewide task force. If we had to identify a liaison, I could certainly do that, but that would really just be to assist us in our own town. We have not been designated as one of the high-risk counties or communities within the state right now, so I don't think there's any real pressure for us to be involved. But obviously, this situation is changing on a pretty rapid basis. So,
okay. My second question is there anything in this last couple of minutes of conversation's got me where I'm not sure I know the answer. Is anything around this discussion other than the focus of the governor's shift from gatherings not greater than 100 to gatherings not greater than 50? So are we talking about a party of 5 people and some neighbor thinks that someone's not related that we have to act on, or is this only gatherings that exceed the governor's limit, which will be down to 50?
it has been very unclear. I think we are all leaning towards that it is referring to gatherings that exceed the total limit and not somebody has 2 friends over and they're not social distancing. But because it's been so vague in its delivery to law enforcement, that's why the conversation is continuing with the governor. I think we're all left with the same questions you have.
Okay, and then my last question, assuming that it is only focused on gatherings greater than 50 people, over the past 4 months, how many gatherings of greater than 50 people have we had here in Medfield?
We've only had calls in that number up at the state hospital, and that was just to assure that social distancing was taking place and that groups of 10 or under were related. We had no violations that occurred.
Okay, so my point at this stage is a practical matter for this town. It sounds to me like it's a good chance this is a theoretical discussion we've just had about a second sort of circumstances, again, assuming it's only on the maximum size of a gathering, a set of circumstances that we're not likely to see if people continue to behave the way they've been behaving through this crisis ever since March.
I would think that the community has demonstrated their willingness to follow the governor's orders, and I fully expect them to continue to do that.
Okay. Okay, I'll sleep well tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please.
at the risk of confusing things, but hopefully not, providing some clarification, I would just like to put this in context, which is this is kind of a preventative mode. There's an entirely separate procedure which comes under the local Board of Health, and there is a court process when you're dealing with actual infection and the need to quarantine, and if you have people who are not cooperating in that regard. That's an entirely different process, which I suppose the police are available if requested to provide support, but it's not their primary function. They would have a supportive role in that case at the request of the Board of Health or their agent.
So that's exactly what we have been operating under for the last 4 months. The governor had designated the Department of Public Health and Boards of Health to notify us of violations, that they were actually the people who would issue violations, and we were only there in a support system to assist with dispersing or unruly people. This is the first time that the governor has suggested authorizing local law enforcement to enforce this order, which is why we're a bit uncertain as to the next steps.
And it sounds like we're going to get more information shortly. So perhaps we can take this up again.
Yeah, I mean, again, you look at it in context, which is the numbers were spiking. They could identify about half a dozen major social gatherings that they were fairly irresponsible conduct. A couple down the Cape, actually one as close as Rentham, but they were big social gatherings that either shouldn't have been held in the first place or got out of hand.
Yeah, speaking for myself and thinking about the town of Medfield, I think a reason why we have been as successful as we've been at minimizing how the virus has affected our town is that we've used a degree of moderation, I guess I'd call it, in how we've gone about soliciting people's cooperation, reacting to situations that maybe push the limits. And I think with that kind of an approach, I think that works well in this town. The adoption of any more draconian approach in this town, I can only imagine would, if anything, have a negative impact on our ability to comply with all of the guidance as opposed to a positive impact. And I would hope that we would think very carefully before we choose to go down that kind of a route.
Chief, anything further tonight?
No, thank you.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you, Chief.
coming.
All right. Have a good night now.
You too. Take care.
You too.
Hi, Chief.
Our next appointment is with Jean Minio to discuss the UCC use of Medfield State Hospital.
Yes, let me get Gino.
There are the hydrangeas.
Happy summer. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Gene.
Hey, Gene.
Hello.
Our senior pastor, Phil Bauman, is on with me as well tonight. And as Christine said, I'm actually wearing my other hat in town with the church. And we wanted to just get some feedback and some response to our request, our interest in potentially using some of the state hospital property for some of our gatherings. Obviously within the guidelines set up by the governor, but like every other business or organization in town, we're really just settling into a new normal. And with the return to school in a hybrid model and our programs starting up again in September, that's where we just don't have space at the church, inside or outside, really, for our middle school and our high school groups in particular. Some of our adult groups and Bible studies are meeting at people's homes, but we could imagine where there might be some other opportunities there where they might be interested in a spot on the property too. So I think the front space is probably our preferred location, especially with kids, so that pickup or drop off would be easier. But our middle school program has 60 to 70 kids every week. That would be too many to meet on any one given night. Our senior high group is a little bit smaller, like 40, 45 with their leaders. And then they are meeting within small groups themselves and the middle school group. So those are groups of 5, 7, 8 kids plus 2 leaders. So it kind of gives you a sense of some of the programs we were thinking about that just need some physical open space and a place to meet, and wanted to ask about whether or not the hospital might be an option for that.
Questions? Mr. Murby?
My first question would be, why would it not? It's our town property. It's a big piece of land. We're not regulating who can. I mean, this is kind of an internal activity that the church has. Unless we're foreseeing large, different, diverse groups all wanting to use the same piece of property up there. I guess maybe the question should be, is there a particular time that you're trying to literally carve out a piece of the land that's every Tuesday night from 7 to 9? Or is it something that the town would need to do to prevent other people who wouldn't be able to intuitively figure out that they probably shouldn't wander into a group that looks like it's doing some coordinated activity?
Yeah, I think that's more the case, Gus, and we haven't actually figured out that plan yet, given the schools are starting a little bit later, but knowing if this was an option would help us in our planning, but the middle school kids have traditionally met every Monday. We might need to split that into, say, 2 groups to keep the numbers down. The senior high kids meet every Sunday evening. Probably have to be a little bit earlier with the daylight hours, and not likely to do it in the winter, but could imagine this going into the fall, weather permitting.
You're not planning to use the chapel itself?
Not yet.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. Sorrell.
just for
Please.
clarification, Gene, you're just talking about using the outside grounds?
Correct, Mark.
Okay.
There is one suggestion I'd have for you to consider, to the extent that when you only use the outside grounds, you're hostage to the weather. The Boy Scouts have on occasion used the Rocky Woods has a pavilion with a cover. So you'd still be outside. It's a pretty good sized pavilion. So not to chase you away from the state hospital, but
Yeah.
in planning for potential inclement weather, or even kind of like cool weather, sometimes a roof helps. You can hang lamps up and things like that.
Right.
So it might be something to consider as even a further option. But
Okay.
I can't foresee any reason why we wouldn't welcome having people in town use the state hospital property.
And do we need to sort of formally schedule something like this with somebody?
I think, Jean, if you just give me a heads up and let me know when you're going to be up there, in case
Okay.
there are any questions or comments that come in, they're concerned about a group of people up there, we'll know that you're up there.
Okay. Phil,
If
did you have
we use the Norfolk Hunt Club as an example, I mean, they use the land, but what they do if they think they're going to be doing something that's going to interfere with others is they put their signs up that say, listen, we're going to be riding through here on Saturday, this month, that month, and that month. So please keep your dogs on a leash. So if anything, I would imagine, if it was a problem, I would say, cautionary or notice letting people know what's going on ought to be enough to, if we start filling up all 90 some acres with active groups, this would be a pretty interesting town.
Watch me.
I was like, don't challenge her.
Careful, guys.
Mr.
Phil, is there
Marcucci,
anything else you wanted to add?
Mr. Marcucci, any questions?
No.
I think it's a fine idea. I think we got plenty
Phil,
of
you're
room
on
up there.
mute.
Phil,
Phil's on
you're-
mute.
The church
So
I'm on mute. They don't have to listen to me. No, we were just concerned about, first of all, it would be great to use it, but then we were wondering just in terms of scheduling, how we would, schedule that. But it sounds like at this point, that wouldn't be a big issue.
No.
Yeah.
Hey, Christine, the only other thing I can think of is, especially as it starts getting darker out, I think the entrance to the, officially people aren't supposed to be going onto the campus after dusk, whatever dusk is.
Correct.
So to the extent that the police routinely look for people who are staying there or on there past dusk, it might be useful to let the police know if you're going to be there in the dark, but I can't think of too much else.
But
Yeah.
We'll let them know.
Okay, great.
I would just be careful where you're using the grounds. I'd just be careful before you sit.
You're good. Thank
Just
you.
saying.
Great. That's great news.
Take care.
Thank you.
Here,
Okay.
Phil. So long, Gene.
Our next appointment is with Jeff Marble, Medfield Food Cover, to discuss new location.
There we go. Should be all set, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for coming.
Go on mute if you're talking.
You guys see me?
We can't see
No.
you.
We can hear you.
Hear you, but not see you.
Hold on. I'm going to ask you to start your video. There you go.
There you go.
You have to excuse me. At this point, I've only used Zoom as a social tool. So you're getting the rough draft tonight. I'm here tonight representing the Medfield Food Cupboard. The Medfield Food Cupboard has been looking for new space for over 15 years, very casually looking for most of that time period. However, the COVID-19 deal has recently brought our search to a real head. In addition to seeing restrictions, being space limited, due to the capacity of the church, the size that we have to work with. We're dealing with curbside deliveries where we're trying to work out of the Bank of America parking lot right now. It's just everything's stored in the basement. We have to move upstairs. So it's been tough with COVID-19. It's also been tough in general before COVID-19, just because we are so limited in the amount of space we have and the control that we have over the space that we have been using. My goal tonight is to actually request a piece of property or some space on a piece of town-owned land where the food pantry might, through privately raised funds, build a building to serve the food pantry and the clients in town. I have a couple sites that we will reference in my mini presentation tonight. However, we are also open to any ideas whatsoever that you might bring. I have some things to share tonight. First of all is a video that gets into what our space looks like now, what we do to serve our clients now, and then it also gets into what we might be able to do with a larger space that we have some more control over. Then I also have some snapshots of what a potential building might look like. And I also have some shots from the GIS mapping system that show where some of these locations are in town, showing where existing buildings are and wetlands and stuff like that. That's just to help get kind of a visual of what we're thinking. Anytime you guys have questions, please feel free to interrupt. And my mind's been working on this for a long time at this point, and it's hard for me to know what I'm missing, what I'm getting. So I encourage questions. But I'm going to start with the video. Like I said, you got to excuse my lack of technological skills. I will get through this. May not be the smoothest guy in the world, but hang on, and here comes our video. Figures. Maybe I won't have a video tonight.
We caught a glimpse of a picture.
Yeah, that isn't going to take us too far. Well, I did dry runs of this afternoon and it worked just fine. Oh, here we go, maybe.
It's looking hopeful.
I am in Maine, so it might be a technology thing.
Could be the speed of your internet connection.
I hate to tell you, but that got updated last week. And it works well until I have an audience. This is disappointing. I'll go through it a little bit verbally. What I remember is in part of the video. We've been operating out of the shared space with the UCC for about 28 years. When I started 23 years ago with the food cupboard, there was about 20 to 24 clients. Today there's 75 clients, and each client's a family unit. And the total number of people served right now is about 185. We have 2 distributions per month. Traditionally, clients come in to Fellowship Hall, which is upstairs in the UCC, and they're able to shop for their groceries. With COVID, we have to do curbside service. So we work with client-generated lists of what they would like, and we pack about 500 bags per distribution, carry them upstairs, add fresh meat, fresh vegetables, and then distribute them to the clients out in the Bank of America parking lot. There's a lot of moving of food that goes on. Right now, we're operating in about 850 square feet in the basement of the church. About half of that space is reduced headroom, dirt floor. It's all down the basement, and none of it's easy to work with. We are able to store about a month's worth of food down there. And we have 1 full-size refrigerator, 1 full-size chest freezer, and a baby chest freezer. And with that, we're trying to serve our 185 clients. We're really scared right now of the parking situation with Bank of America. When we do a traditional distribution today, we use all 32 spots in the bank's parking lot for our clients. The approximately 18 volunteers that serve the clients all park on Miller Street. If we were to lose the Bank of Boston parking lot, we would be in trouble immediately because there's no alternatives for parking that are close to the church. And my mind never really entered too much the consideration of losing Bank of America, but during COVID, they were shut for quite a while. In fact, they just recently opened in mid-July. And that just made me think that that's not necessarily an important branch to Bank of America. And if someone were to take over that space and build something where we did not have the ability to use that parking lot, we'd be in trouble quickly. So having a new space would allow us to open more often. It would allow us to be open during the daytime instead of after bank hours. It would allow us to open maybe 2 or 3 times a week instead of once every 2 weeks. It would allow us to, some of the seniors might be able to get there on the senior bus because we would be open during the daytime when the senior service is working. People who work days or nights might be accommodated through different schedules and different opening times of our own food pantry. We would really cut down on the amount of work. Right now we haul 2,000 items up from the basement upstairs for each distribution. To give you an idea how much food moves through there, when we had the food drive in May where we parked a trailer out in front of the public safety building, in the 30 days we did the food collection, we estimated we got 15,000 pounds of food. And that's 15,000 pounds of food that had to be sorted and moved down to the basement, only to be moved back up to the basement, for actual distribution. A new food pantry would hopefully also allow us some efficiency for sure. Another important thing that we're really high on is the idea that it would allow us some privacy to meet with clients. Right now, there's absolutely no space that we have where somebody can come in and talk with one of the presidents or one of the officers or even possibly an outreach person. There is no private space. Generally, we're just really looking to improve our services to the town And I'm gonna see if I can stop this now. You know, we're hoping to improve our services by offering a better, more complete product. Apologize for the video not working. Like I said, we practiced nicely this afternoon and everything worked great. I have a couple model buildings where I literally just picked pictures off the internet. Well, actually, let me step back a second. I'll talk about the two spaces that we've kind of eyeballed at this point. The first space is at the wastewater treatment plant. And the wastewater treatment plant came to our attention because that's where the animal shelter is sited. And we like that idea because it is a space that's kind of removed from what's going on in town. It offers our clients some privacy. At the same time, there is some stuff going on there. So, you know, if volunteers were there alone, nobody would be really concerned about being out in the woods alone somewhere in the building. Building at a site like the wastewater treatment plant would allow us to build a very simple building without spending a lot of money on architecture and trying to fit with other buildings in a neighborhood or something like that. The other site that I kind of stumbled into through poking around in some of the town spaces is what is probably known as the lot that the landfill is on. But what some people might not realize is the lot that the landfill on also includes a corner of the lot that's up by West Street and the railroad tracks. The landfill is surrounded by a lot of wetlands, but that corner of the lot up by West and the railroad track seems to be a dry location. And right now, I think it's a somewhat open area with piles of dirt stockpiled there. Let me go to the pictures the snapshots that I took from the GIS software.
Hey, Jeff, are you talking about West Mill Street or West Street by the railroad track?
West Street and the railroad tracks.
Because that's not anywhere close to the landfill.
That is, if you look at the tax maps, that is the parcel that includes the landfill. And you'll see it when I go to the GIS maps in a minute for that.
Okay. Okay.
So this is the GIS map showing the wastewater treatment plant. I chose to overlay the floodplain and the wetlands, and it shows the wastewater. This is the wastewater treatment plant. This over here is the current animal shelter. It shows you that there's a lot of open space in the back that seems to be somewhat safe from water. And up in this corner, it's, I'll be polite and call it a scrap yard or a boneyard or a junk yard or outside storage. But it's a place where some old highway vehicles have gone to die, in addition to some less active equipment is over there.
There's also the solar there.
Well, I'm heading there. I also have a little bit more of a close-up there. So you can see where the animal shelter sits relative to the yellow lot line. And we were thinking that if we were similarly located in this kind of area up here, there is a fence that would have to be moved. There is some stuff that would have to be moved, but generally that's the kind of area we're thinking of there. If I go to a more current view, I set up a little bit of a Google map, which shows current satellite stuff, current satellite views. So it has the solar in there. And I drew a box, and the box that I drew represents a building size of about 2,000 square feet and about 12 parking spaces. Now, our you know, what do we ultimately think we need? We've kind of identified that we're going to be in the 2,000 to 3,000 square foot range. However, we've also come to learn that there's many models, many different ways that we can run the food pantry. And odds are, if we get a space, we can figure out how to work with it. So that covers the wastewater treatment plant. I'm going to go back and look at the West Street location on the GIS map. So here's the West Street location. This is the landfill down here. This is the Legion for your orientation. And then this corner up here is the kind of high and dry corner that I'm talking about. And all of this show, it's all lot number 49. I'm not sure what map or whatnot this is, but it's all, I found it all from the town's website. So this, when, you know, I'm afraid to call it the landfill lot, but because I don't want to, I know there's issues with the landfill, but this is the lot that the landfill is part of, but it's this corner that I'm specifically thinking of. And again, on my Google map, we'll take a ride up West Street. And on my Google map, I again drew a square or a rectangle that approximately represents, again, a 2,000 square foot building and 12 parking spaces. And for your reference, that amounts to about 0.13 acres. So that's generally site-wise what we've been thinking of and talking about at this point. Completely open to other suggestions. Again, we like these because they're fairly out of sight. They would allow us to build a less expensive building. I'd like to go and just give you also a quick idea of some buildings that we were thinking of. Well, a building. And really, we're looking for something terribly simple, single floor, no basement, decent looking, but like I like to say, no curly cues and whatnot. I just have another picture of the same building. You know, a little garage door on the side so we can load stuff in and out of, but something along these lines. You know, it's a commercial industrial type of building, but that's you know, the whole idea would be to keep the building costs and the maintenance as low as we could. So that's generally what I have to share. I really wish the video had worked. Right now, the state has offered us an opportunity. Governor Baker just came out with a big plan. It's called the Massachusetts Food Security Infrastructure Grant Program. And it allows for all kinds of projects for food pantries and people serving food to the needy throughout the state. It allows for everything but buying food. And looking at the terms, the timing of the grant, you know, there's no way we're going to ever get our hand out in time to get money to build a building. However, there is a chance that we could get our hand out in as part of this grant application process. There is a chance that we could ask for some site plan engineering to be paid for by this grant. So with that in mind, that puts a little bit of urgency to our request. You know, obviously, we don't need an answer. We're not going to get an answer anytime soon. There's a process, which that's kind of my next area. But that is the one thing, short of losing parking or access at the church, that really pushes us ahead. just as an FYI, we looked at a lot of rental space in town. It's really difficult to come up with single floor, easy access for our clients, bathrooms for our clients and our volunteers. It's surprisingly difficult to come up with good space in town that fits the bill, that fits the needs of the food pantry right now. I'd like to thank the people that from the town that have come to visit the food pantry. That was a great learning process for us to hear from the people in town who have come, or the town officials who have come to visit us. I know the town officials that came to visit took away some information for themselves too. After, you know, what I've had to show you tonight, my question for you would be, since this is a unique process, I think that we're embarking on here, is, you know, how might we go forward in trying to make something like this work? If we could make something like this work.
So why don't we start with questions with Mr. Murby?
Okay, so both questions, you asked for ideas and thoughts, and what's interesting as I listened to you, my head was going in a completely different sort of direction, so I'm probably, my comments may or may not even be helpful, but I guess the first question I have, did you look at the potpourri building area at all? I have the sense that not all those buildings are occupied fully.
We actually use some of potpourri's space as an offsite storage location. And so we know the builder, I call him Seventh Wave Dave. We know him well, the owner pretty well. And the only space he currently has is an upstairs space. And his problem there with any of his spaces would be building to accommodate the needs of the food cupboard with, you know.
That's fine. I didn't have the sense that that was fully being used. So that was the first thing that came to mind. I'll give you a reaction. Putting a food cupboard out next to or behind the wastewater treatment plant doesn't strike a real resonant chord for me, just on that basis. The two other places, actually three other, one is a theoretical answer that's probably not practical. Sounds to me, in the best of all worlds, if a place like the FAF Center were available for the food cupboard, that would kind of, both from a location, single floor, general size, parking, that would be like an ideal thing for us to do. If we knew for sure what Parks and Rec was doing, and we knew for sure what the school, what Dale Street was doing, the FAF Center could potentially be an ideal solution if we only had another 5 years to give it. Is that okay?
And a pocket full of money to bring it up to.
Well, but I'm assuming that potentially fixing a building up, because my other two ideas are buildings. All this is really just ideas. It's not.
This is where we started, Gus.
The first thing that came to mind as you were talking was the Dwight Derby House. And part of why I'm bringing that up is my understanding is the financial situation of the Dwight Derby House is an interesting artifact of Medfield history. We have some issues we're probably going to have to address on how to keep that in shape and of some use to the town. So that jumped out at me. And then the other one that jumped out at me, which again is probably a long range thing, and I'm getting out in front of my skis relative to the State Hospital Development Committee. But the very first building as you go in, which is actually a building that the Master Planning Committee had pegged as kind of a bed and breakfast. But our consultants basically said this, in our modeling, that doesn't make any sense from an economic standpoint. So we'll call that the Phase 5 development and hope that somehow or another it makes sense down the road. That first small building on the left struck me again as a building which obviously work would have to be done to it, and it's not single floor, but it's in a pretty good location. So I only throw those out as just off the top of my head ideas. The thing that's missing for me right now in being able to react is that I would prefer that we figure out what to do here, and I'm certainly in favor of doing something. So it's not an issue of I don't think you need it, but I prefer that we did it with a degree of strategic thoughtfulness,
Yep.
Which probably means we have to think about this in the context of a broader set of town needs.
Certainly. The state hospital has certainly been discussed. The fear there was jumping into a project and, we don't know when we're going to come out the other end. Your
Mhm.
idea of the building that's right there on the kind of front corner of the property seems like it would kind of remove us somewhat from, following the infrastructure build out at the hospital. We might be able to get that going a lot quicker.
Right. That's where I'm out over my skis with the development committee. They might tell me at our next meeting, stop coming up with stupid ideas that you put on public meetings, for all I know. And just Pete and Mike and Christine, for your benefit, I had a conversation with Kathy McDonald from Medfield Outreach earlier, I guess late last week. And one of the, again, a strategic question I have for that, as they redefine themselves, and presumably I would guess could potentially be faced with the need for, providing a broader set of services to the town. Part of where I'm going with this is saying, well, that one building, which would probably be as non-interfering a building for a developer as you could get on the state hospital property, I could envision us taking a broader look at some of the social service needs of the town and potentially being faced with a need for youth or for Medfield Outreach to have a more expansive facility. And again, this is all just off the top of my head, but having those needs all come together and coalesce around a modest-sized building like that to renovate it and bring it up for town use, it's purely an idea. It's not a plan, but that's where my head has been going around this very early stage of thinking.
Yep.
Mr. Marcucci, questions?
So I don't have any particular questions. I would agree with Gus that I'm certainly supportive of doing this, and I think my initial reaction to both locations you suggested was that, gee, I wish we could find a little nicer spot for, then next to the wastewater treatment plant and next to the landfill. But I give you credit for not starting out with the premium piece of land in town.
Taj Mahal.
So I think I'd love to help you and love to find a solution here. Have you talked to Sarah Raposa or Amy Collin at all? Okay.
We've talked to Sarah. She's aware of at least the need. She was one of the people that toured the food pantry. Sarah is also one that mentioned the Dwight Derby House, and a few others. And she sent us to a lot of the different property owner, office space, warehouse space property owners in town. And we've looked at a lot of those properties over the last 3 months. And I'm not exactly sure how versed she is on what I showed you tonight, but we have had some conversation with Sarah.
Mike, the other thought that jumped out at me, and you and I, Pete, because it's lot number 3 that I'm talking about, you're not in the conversation because of where you live, but that's as steadfastly as I've defended lot 3 as a commercial property. That might also be a location, like it would be, not the entire lot, obviously, but in light of some of the tentative thoughts we've had around that land, the idea of subdividing that in a way that would make, to go with Jeff's thought about literally putting in semi-industrial build, I don't know, industrial is too strong a word, but a functional building. I wouldn't rule out exploring ways to possibly use a piece of lot 3 to do that, which puts it close to the center, puts it off on a side street with potentially easy traffic flow. Probably certainly gives you a better spot than next to the wastewater treatment plant. I wouldn't, at this stage, again, right off the top of my head, I wouldn't rule that out either.
Mhm. Yeah, I did come up with those. To be honest, there's a lot of space where the center is located also, but I just kind of tried to stay out of those areas because they seemed like there was a lot going on there at this point.
Well, when you're talking about 0.13 acres over near West Street, it's like that's,
Yeah, yeah. In my, again, that 0.13 is probably the smallest that would work for us. The real ask may be more, but that would be, just trying to give some perspective.
Well, I
even
guess
a half acre
Yeah.
would be, I don't think would be excessively detrimental to the potential uses the rest of the lot might be put to.
if Mike and Gus, if you guys are set, and I guess I had a couple comments, which I'll start with saying that I guess I view the wastewater treatment site a little more benevolently than anybody else apparently, because I don't regard it as the worst site in town. And I think, I mean, the animal shelter has a nice building there. I think the wastewater treatment building itself is pretty nice, and you just have to put up a fence to block off the pits maybe, so you're not looking at those. And I guess my reaction to the West Street sites that you showed us, Jeff, is that I didn't realize that there was so much usable land there. I knew that there was elevated land there out of the wetlands, but I didn't realize it was as big as you showed it on your plans. So I'm fascinated by that site now for some town uses.
I get first dibs.
Yeah. Well, you've certainly raised your hand first. I mean, it's just the DPW that's just storing dirt there now. I think the Dwight Derby House is a fascinating site.
The parking issue there, I would question.
Yeah. It's too bad because there's a big parking lot obviously at the post office and at the what I think it was the Jackson Fabrics building on the corner, but I mean, you really can't be using those, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
I think the state hospital properties are going to be problematic because what I've learned is from being a selectman and with municipal buildings is that it's just much cheaper to build a new building than to renovate an old one, unfortunately. I was shocked when our old public safety building, which was built in the 60s and 70s, turned out to be too old to save, that we just had to pitch it and start again. And I know the town actually looked at buying the Potpourri building, but it just was too expensive to renovate it for the needs of the town.
Yeah.
So in general, it's less expensive for the town to build something new. So I would assume it's the same for the food cupboard.
Yeah.
And the buildings at the hospital are going to be very expensive to rehab. The only way that those work economically is if you get the historic tax credits and the low income tax credits for the housing part. So I think it's a great idea for the town to partner with the food cupboard on this and to somehow support it. It's clearly an enterprise in town that I think that the town should be helping. So
Yeah, the one other thought that I'm sorry, Pete. Sorry.
Just the final thought was that I did tour the facility that they're operating out of when they invited us to come again recently. It was the second time I'd been in there, and I had forgotten how horrible it was. It's just totally unbelievable that they're operating out of such a cramped space. It's so inefficient up and down stairs, and as Jeff said, that he's made a nice spot in like a sub basement with a dirt floor, but it's not really very serviceable. It's so much more work for their volunteers and for them to service the people because of the limitations of the space. So that's about it for me.
So Pete and Jeff, the one other question I was going to raise is because you mentioned, with Gus's mention of Lot 3 and that area over there, and thinking about the amount of space that you need. I mean, the Council on Aging has been interested in for some time in expanding you know, what they have over there. And so when we think about partnering with the town on on this kind of a project, I wonder if it might at least be worth a conversation with the Council on Aging as to what you're thinking about for the space that you need, and whether that kind of space that would be useful to you could also be useful to them when you weren't using it. It might enable them during times when the food cupboard didn't actively have people in there to do some more of the stuff they're looking to do, and you know, tack it on to the existing building, because obviously there's a ton of parking there.
Yeah.
And just thinking about that, and whether that's something that you might discuss with the Council on Aging and Roberta and the FOSI board and all that.
That
That seems like-
actually, one of my thoughts all along was to try to find a space where the parking already existed and we could just kind of play off of somebody else's parking, you know. But again, there's, depending on where you go, there's some limits on operating hours and the potential of losing that cooperation at any time, which is kind of which has absolutely got us right now.
I at least think that piece would not be an issue there. I mean, it wouldn't be an operating hour issue, and it wouldn't be a parking issue. It would just be figuring out how the synergy between your space and what their additional space needs, because they would like to expand and in a couple of different ways. And because the building is so new, it doesn't quite fit right now with the town's capital planning. But if this was a way to kind of bridge that a little bit, I think it'd be an interesting conversation for you to have.
Yep.
That's a great
Mr.
idea,
Chairman?
Mike. Yes, Mr. Sorrell.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that actually Lot 3 would be an exception, because I think the town meeting already voted to give the Board of Selectmen authority, and it's still in place. Otherwise, in all likelihood, you'd need town meeting authority at the very least for a ground lease arrangement.
For any of these other sites you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yep, okay. And Lot 3 actually doesn't have that much usable space. I seem to recall it's between 3 and 4 acres maybe at most.
I think if I can suggest, actually, Roberta Lynch is watching our meeting currently. She's given an indication to me that she'd love to have a conversation with you if you want to set that up in the next few days, and at least explore that opportunity.
Yep. Okay.
Great.
Good.
Anything further, Jeff?
Nope, that's it for me. I would really like to thank everybody for your consideration, your time. If there's any ideas of how we might move forward, can we have a kind of conversation through email on different sites? At what point do we have to, you know, actually appear before the board? Looking at the West Street, do we got to talk to Highway Department? Looking at water and sewer, do we need to talk to water and sewer? You know, how do we kind of kick this along?
I think that what you want to do is you want to be talking to Christine about it all, and she'll coordinate with the different groups. I mean, DPW is the one that has the piles of dirt down in West Street, and certainly water and sewer is interested in the what goes on at their site. So.
Mm-hmm.
And we can have a further conversation about the landfill as well.
Yep. Okay.
And the selectmen aren't allowed to talk to you except at a meeting. So.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's why I asked. So, all right. Well, thank you everybody for your consideration and your time tonight. I very much appreciate it.
Thanks for
Thank you,
coming.
Jeff.
And I will
Jeff?
yeah,
I was going to say, email us the movie.
absolutely. That's
I
right.
believe actually Abby has already emailed it to all of the selectmen.
Oh, all right. I'm not looking at my email yet. So.
I have the best administrative assistant ever. Actually, she's not she is my administrator, flat out. So, all right, thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Jeff.
Thank you,
23
Jeff.
years. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, our next item is action items. Chris, vote to call special town meeting, vote to open special town meeting warrant, approve warrant for the 2020 state primary election.
Well, why don't we do the election first, because I actually have Marion, who's your assistant town clerk, here to talk about what she needs this evening.
Excellent.
Marion?
Thanks for coming, Marion. Marion Benaldi.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Marion.
So you have the warrant in front of you for the September 1st primary. that to be voted upon and signed so that I can get that distributed throughout the town. And then the other piece that you have is for you to vote to appoint our election workers for both early voting and the day of the polls of September 1st. Early voting starts here on August 22nd. We're doing weekend hours on the 22nd and the 23rd from 8 to 12, Saturday and Sunday. And then we have regular town hall hours Monday through Friday, including we'll be here until 7:30 on Tuesday as well, doing early voting. And then the polls will be opened on the 1st from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. at the Council on Aging, as usual.
So in addition to our vote to sign the warrant, do we get to actually come in and sign this physically? Are we allowed to do that, or does this have to be done by stamp?
I don't know. That's a Christine question.
There's a rumor Marion's meeting people in the back parking lot for signatures. So
I have been in the back parking lot quite a bit, but we're getting things done. I'll meet you in the back parking lot.
I haven't signed something in months. I feel like my primary function is gone.
I have a little table. I wheel it out. Very fancy.
I assume no checks have gone out like in 3 months, Mike, because I haven't signed any of the warrants. But I don't know about you guys.
Well, I will move that we vote to sign the warrant for the 2020 state primary election.
Second.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Murby,
Aye.
and Mr. Marcucci, aye. And I will also move that we appoint the election workers and inspectors as requested by interim town clerk James Mullen in the list provided to us, which I will not read off in its entirety.
Second.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Murby,
Aye.
and Mr. Marcucci, aye.
Those are official votes. Those are official voting votes. I feel ayes are most appropriate for those.
well, I will reflect that in the minutes.
So we'll have official votes and unofficial votes from henceforth now. Thank you, Marion. Anything else?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marion.
Thanks for
Thank you,
coming.
Marion.
Oh, Marion. So if we have to meet you in the back parking lot to sign these things, when's a good time?
Well, you can usually, I'm here. So
Normal business hours. Okay, just making sure.
generally normal business hours, and then
By when do you need to post them, though?
they need to be posted. Christine, it's on there. I don't have it in front of me. I believe it's the 25th. Don't I have to
Okay.
get them up 10 days before? And I believe it's the 25th.
And they're ready to go now, so we can do it this week, and you got them.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think if we do it this week, that would be good.
Yeah, that'd be good. And I'm here, so whatever works well for you guys.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Marion.
And I was kidding. You are allowed to come into the building. I was kidding. Wait till you see what I've done with the place.
A lot of plexiglass.
Okay. Thanks, Marion.
Chris,
Okay.
which one do you want to take next, Chris?
Let's just keep moving down. Let's go on to the
Chapter 90.
reimbursement. Yes.
Okay. $297,447.28 for rubber chip seal.
Mhm.
$66,320.90 for South Street extension.
All right. And these are seeking reimbursements from the Commonwealth.
So I only had one question, and this is just for education. Why was the second one for $66,320.90 instead of $67,055.60?
We use the money that we appropriated at town meeting for the Uber and Lyft fund. We use that money as part of this.
And the reason we wanted to use it that way rather than go after the full reimbursement, we're going to use all the Chapter 90 funds one way or the other.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We have a motion then?
Yes, I will. Are we going to do both the chip seal and the South Street extension?
Sure.
All right, so I would move that we approve the Chapter 90 reimbursement requests, $297,447.28 for rubber chip seal and $66,320.90 for South Street extension.
Second.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Murby,
Yes.
and Mr. Marcucci, yes.
So that was an unofficial vote because they were yeses.
Yeah.
Very
that's
boring. vote.
Administrative.
Very
We left ourselves some wiggle room on that.
Nobody better try to count on that vote. Our next item is approved change order for additional insurance costs for time extension for Mount Nebo maintenance project. Chris?
So this is a change order in the amount of $33,396. We had a 12-month delay on this project, so we are paying for the additional insurance for the additional year now for the contractor. And the delay was due to, we needed to negotiate to have the two cell tower companies come off.
So my first question is, so who was it that didn't really plan this out right? Was it truly our delay, or was this a delay caused by the phone companies because they couldn't get their act together?
It's a little bit of both, to be honest, but I would say we would probably take at least 80% of this. We needed to get them out. We needed to go out to bid. And unfortunately, the delay was between the transition between Mike and myself in getting the new RFP. So it is our responsibility to cover it. And this project came in $300,000 under what was estimated. So we will cover that $33,000 in the change order. Doesn't increase the cost of what we already appropriated.
Okay, so then my next question is, if I look at the two memos that came with this package, the one that's dated April 12th claims that the monthly premium is $3,711.18. And that was the number that I think the 12 months, I did the math, or maybe I didn't. Anyway, there's one net monthly premium, $3,711.18. And then there's a June 20th memo, or June 29th memo, that says the premium expense is $2,783 per month. And the total increase in premium was based on, I believe it was the larger number.
The 2,783.
Times 12 won't come out to 33,396, I don't think, does it?
It does on my calculator.
So, okay, maybe, so maybe,
Yeah.
Got it. Let me just, okay, yep, got it. Never mind, let's draw the question. I wasn't paying close enough attention to dates and sequences, right? Okay. You know, I think I automatically assumed that the numbers went up and that, okay, got it. No further questions.
And just one other piece, Water and Sewer has seen this and has approved this change order as well.
Okay.
Well, I would move that we approve the change order for the insurance premium on the Mount Nebo water tank as requested.
Second.
Mr. Peterson.
Yep.
That was a yup.
And
Yes.
Mr. Murby.
Aye.
Yeah.
Let's just count it the yup.
Mr. Marcucci, sure. Yeah, I as well.
Our next item on our agenda is to approve the lease purchase finance agreement for the fire trucks and police cruisers.
I'm assuming the expiration date is not relevant. It was supposed to expire at 5 p.m. yesterday.
They've extended that for us, yes. So this is our first time doing our lease purchase on our capital vehicles that we did at town meeting in June. And this is for the fire truck and the police vehicles.
Yep. And I have one question, just this is an educational question. In the contract itself, there's a place that says the lessee basically will adjust the price if it turns out that the tax advantage treatment of this is an award. Now, I think I understand this. What it is that we've put this thing out indicating that this is a tax exempt lease because it's a municipality, and all that the leasing company is saying is if it turns out that what you represented wasn't true, then you're going to have to give us more money to make the finances work.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, I would move that we approve the lease purchase agreement as requested.
Second.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Murby.
Yes.
And Mr. Marcucci, yes.
Excellent. We're ordering those immediately.
So Chris, do you want to do anything then with the special town meeting issues at this point?
Excuse Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please, Mr. Sorrell.
yeah, on this lease purchase, I went over the documents with Nick, and you had sample documents and sample attachments. I just want to make you aware that there's attachments that are going to need to be signed. There's one's an opinion letter from me. More importantly, there's one that says basically you have the legal authority to do it, so you're going to have to sign it. So I don't know what the timing is when your next meeting is, or whether you want to authorize all necessary signatures as needed.
Why don't we do that?
You know, authorize me to sign.
So Mark, how
Yes.
many signatures are needed? 3 or 1?
I don't
In
have.
other
it.
words,
I don't know
chair?
how they're finally going to produce them, whether it's going to require the chairman, just the chairman, or all 3 selectmen to sign.
Why don't we authorize the town administrator and or the chair to sign the documents then?
All right, I would move that we authorize the town administrator and or the chairman and or each of the selectmen to sign the lease purchase agreement, depending on what is required by the paperwork.
Second.
I'm about to buy my first fire truck.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Murby,
Yes.
and Mr.
Oh, that's an
Marcucci,
aye.
yes.
No, aye.
Aye as well. Aye as well. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Now about the special town meeting, Chris?
So we're still looking at dates, and I want to talk to you a little bit about this. We're currently looking at Tuesday, October 13th, and the potential for October 19th. We're running into several issues. One, the governor did announce, and the legislature announced that they are level funding our Chapter 70 and our unrestricted government aid, but they have not told us yet what our other local aid will be, and they have not issued what our assessments will be yet. So we don't have a full picture of what our state aid is yet, and I'm reluctant to move forward on that until we have that full picture. And we're also running into, in terms of scheduling this, in terms of EEE being outside and early voting. So we're going to need to look at those dates a little closer. I'm going to meet with Mary and Jim Mullen again this week to see if we can kind of narrow this down a little bit more. But I'm reluctant to move forward until we have the full financial picture.
So we'll take that up then at our next meeting.
I think we'll just keep carrying it forward until we have a better idea of what everything else looks like.
Okay. Does that work for you guys?
Works
Sure
for me.
does. Yep.
Thank you.
Then our next agenda item is a town administrator update, Chris.
I actually have a few. One, I want to let you know that we were incredibly disappointed in Eversource during this last storm. They were incredibly responsive during our microburst that we had. We couldn't say enough about them, and they turned around and thoroughly disappointed us. We had the wastewater treatment plant running on generator for over 24 hours. We had several families in town. I think towards the last day, we had 18 families that went almost 5 days without power. Chief Carrico is working with them as to why our response was so dismal compared to what we had prior. So he is working on a follow-up with them and trying to schedule a meeting. One of the other things, let's see, we have town hall staff, obviously weather permitting, it was a little hot the last couple of days, who are sitting outside, who are voluntarily taking shifts outside to serve anybody who has a question or needs to see somebody at the town hall in person. And we'll be doing that as we transition to opening and as we transition to having the town hall open for early voting. If you need something, Marion's one of those people. We're more than happy to meet you outside and go over anything with you as necessary. Unfortunately, the lottery had to be canceled for the Allendale home. We did not have enough qualified candidates. They were over income, the two that we thought we had to go into the lottery. So it has now gone on to a first come, first serve. And it'll be open to anybody in the Commonwealth. And we had to do that, had to pivot on that immediately because we would risk losing the home. We only have a certain number of days in which we have to turn around and sell that, or the homeowner can actually go and sell it on the open market. So unfortunately, we had to cancel the lottery, but we'll still move forward with keeping it as affordable.
Hey, Christine, when
Yep.
this came up in our last meeting, and I thought one of the questions we asked was, did we have applicants and I thought the answer was yes, but was it that they weren't qualified applicants?
We had applicants that hadn't gone through the full process of being vetted, unfortunately.
Okay.
I had indicated to you at our last meeting that I would have our annual appointments for you tonight. And as you can see, you do not. We decided to try and streamline this process. And it's like cleaning out a closet. It gets really bad before it gets better. So we're going to ask for another month to put that together, but we're automating it to make it much easier for committee chairmen to decide who wants to be on the committee, answer the questionnaire through a Google form to just make it easier for them. So we would just ask for everybody's patience to try and complete that for our next meeting.
Good idea.
Let's see. Just a reminder, the school committee is having a forum on Thursday night at 5:30. They'll be talking about the Dale Street project as well as the grade configuration. And then I have one COVID item tonight. As you know, we've been working with Coolidge Corner Theater for many months now, trying to make this project work. I just worked with them. I think it was last Wednesday. We were set to go. We sold the tickets. It sold out in 3.5 minutes. And then the governor announced we had to go from 100 at an outdoor gathering to 50. So I talked to Mark over the weekend. We don't want to abandon the project. So we have an interesting idea that's allowed under phase 2. We'd like to do a drive-in. If we do a drive-in, I talked to John Thompson today. Mark met him on site on Monday. We can do approximately 150 cars, and it's allowed under phase 2, and we could move forward with it the 2 nights of Labor Day weekend, if that's okay with you. Okay, good. Excellent. I really, really want this project to happen. I will let him know, and we'll have some more formalized plans for you as we get closer to Labor Day.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's all I have for this evening.
Thank you so much. Do we have a next meeting date?
Right now, I'm looking at September 1st. We had discussed last summer that we would try and do 1 meeting in July and 1 meeting in August. So if we want to keep to that, our next meeting would be September 1st.
Okay, sounds good. Then Selectmen Reports, Mr. Murphy.
Let's see, two items. I mentioned in passing that I had a nice conversation with Kathy McDonald about Medfield outreach last week, and I've just comment that I think that they're heading in a good direction. I think they're well aware of issues, and I suspect they're actually excited about the opportunity to expand the scope of services to keep up with the name change that was intended to basically target a broader population. So I think they're headed in a good direction. The development committee, the State Hospital Development Committee, had a meeting last Wednesday night, which was kind of the first meeting we had with all the new members. So it was a productive meeting. The new members, I think, have already gotten into the saddle and are contributing in the ways we thought that they would contribute. I think the most important development that we have on the horizon right now is this grant cycle from the mass development folks. Todd Drabenko actually sent out an email this afternoon letting us know that the mass development is starting that cycle. Basically, the applications will have to be in by the first week of September. So he and Sarah are meeting to take a look at the application that we already put in a year ago to see how that might be updated and form the basis for an application for this. What we're basically doing, based on our discussions, is looking to get help through either directly through mass development or perhaps more likely through one or more of their house doctors to help us in this process of rolling out what we've currently envisioned as an RFP process, but in the discussions that we had on Wednesday, we have to make sure that we stay within the constrictions that the state imposes on what you can do by way of putting an RFP out and putting out something in front of it, which the documents that the information we were getting is that the state kind of thinks of that first thing as an RFI. Now, we've already done an RFI to test the feasibility of the master plan. This would be more a pre-cycle that would be looking for statements of interest and qualification. What we would do in an RFP is it would be a publicly announced RFP open to anyone who wanted to bid, but we would have the ability to make sure that any of the potential developers that we talk to as a result of the first stage of the process, we would be able to make sure that they got the RFP packages, even as the RFP itself was available to anybody in the general public. So the good news on that is that grant cycle is starting sooner than we first thought it would, which makes us optimistic that we might see some financial support from the state sooner than we thought we were otherwise going to get it. And that's all I have.
Mr. Marcucci.
Not a ton. We did have another collective bargaining session with the firefighters union. They made a proposal, and the collective bargaining committee is going to review it and get back to them. And then the Dale Street School Building Committee is meeting tomorrow night to talk further about the evolving options and plans, and the rest of it. We got some of the construction estimate costs back from the estimator. And then Christine already mentioned the forum. I think it's going to be similar. I think it's a sort of a companion forum to the one that happened back in May, but this is focused specifically on the question of grade configuration and the educational aspects of the grade configuration. And that's Thursday at 5:30. The school committee is doing that. That's not the Dale Street Building Committee. So, and that's all I have.
And I've got two things. One is I was asked to come back to the center last Friday for my monthly office hours, and I was there. No one found me, unfortunately. So I guess that'll be starting up every the first Friday of every month going forward. The office hours are 9 to 10. Anybody can come and talk at the center. And then the other thing I'll just mention, which was Sarah gave me my button here for the townwide master planning committee.
Nice.
And we had a meeting, but it was scheduled the night of the one of the storms, and the power was out. And so since everybody's zooming, we figured it was called off because of that. So, and that's it for me. Informational.
I have to say, Pete, I think the townwide master planning committee is giving the hospital master planning committee a run for its money on committee swag. I think you've got excellent posters, signs. I mean, it's very well done.
Sarah was actually giving out things that are called cozies, which I guess go around a tin can. So if you want your,
I believe those are for beer
sparkling
cans.
water.
I'm pretty sure those are for beer cans, Pete. Just so you know, you wouldn't want to.
Mine's for sparkling water. Chris, anything in the informational? Couple grants. Congratulations to Chief Carrico.
Yeah, two things in the informational. Chief Carrico found out this week that he received the award for $220,000. That's for the SCBA bottles and equipment that we were looking to upgrade. That was a capital budget item that was going to be coming up. So we're incredibly excited to have that in the grant. And then we also found out that we received the Shared Streets Grant Award of $11,500. And one of the projects for that is to try and work to take the alleyway next to Cutlets and turn that into an eating way on the weekends, to hang some lights and have some high top tables. It also allowed us to purchase some highway barriers in Medfield blue, of course, that we're going to use at some of the downtown restaurants to try and give them some outdoor seating. And then it will also allow us to use them for the holiday stroll, which is great. So.
Hey, Christine, on the fire department grants, I noticed going through that most of the equipment, the grant indicated that the amount of the grant for each item had been reduced because the average cost was considerably lower than what we had projected. I assume that we really can get that equipment for the average cost, that we didn't get hornswoggled by, so that it's legitimate.
It's legitimate. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I just want to note that we have a comment in the Q&A from eagle-eyed Bill Massaro that we have neglected to act on the Medfield soccer sign request, even though it's in red on our agenda. So I will take the liberty of making a motion to approve the request from Medfield Youth Soccer to post signs from August 12th to September 2nd.
Second.
Thank you, Bill, since Nick reminded me twice not to forget that today.
Mr. Peterson
Yes.
and Mr. Murby
Yes.
and Mr. Marcucci, yes. With apologies to Medfield Soccer for narrowly missing them. I have registered my kids for the next season already, but for those who have not, you'll need to see the signs for this upcoming season.
That was my
You may-
fault. I printed out the agenda from Friday instead of the one from today.
When we start looking at board appointments to update them, we probably need a Board of Selectmen process referee honorary position for Bill.
So I think with that, I can move that we adjourn.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, Mark?
Mr. Storell?
Yeah, I just wanted for informational to apprise you that I received a copy Monday of the decision of the Superior Court in the Goldman versus Concom case, finding in Concom's favor, entering the judgment in Concom's favor and against the Goldmans. They've been given until 30 days to file the required paperwork with the Concom.
I just read that before the meeting and it seemed like a complete victory for the town. So congratulations, Mark, on your success.
Thank you, Mark. I read that decision this morning as well. Well done.
Thank you.
And now I will move that we adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Peterson,
Yep.
Mr. Murby,
Aye.
and Mr. Marcucci, aye. I'm going to make that one official.
Formal vote.
Bye,
Good night,
everybody.
everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
Hey, everyone.